The terms in red came out of the tradition of our discussions over decades. Over a long time, academic discussions, practitioners' discussions within the groups, etc. And now these three terms are written in German laws. Now they are official terms. Right? So self-help in Germany consists of three elements. That's what the law says. It's the first time that the law followed the smart people. That does not mean that the law gives a definition in details. Of course not. Never a law does that. But as I understood yesterday in our discussions here, as well as over dinner, there is so much confusion about the terms in this group. I mean, we hoped to overcome this confusion over the meetings, but there are so many people new here that the new question is always what is self-help and things like that. So, in very brief, if we speak about self-help groups, that is a local phenomenon. People can tell you when they meet, where they meet, who are the members. There's a personal encounter. It's usually a small thing between 6 people and, I don't know, 30 people or whatever. And they meet every Monday or every second Monday or once a month, whatever the rhythm is, but there is a rhythm, and they can tell you the names or whatever, they can tell you the faces. The number of self-help groups, we always refer to 100,000 because that's a very nice number, it's easy to remember. Nobody went from one village to the next and counted, you know. So they are estimated, grounded on empirical research in smaller areas, and then you can calculate. Obviously, we have reached what the scientists call a kind of ceiling effect, you know, that's the ceiling. So a curve goes like this, and then you can invest a lot of effort, but you cannot really increase the number. You know, it's satisfied, the market is satisfied. So obviously that's a stable number over many years now. We have a growth in mental disorders, I mentioned that in my presentation yesterday, and in rare diseases. In more and more cases, people come together, of course, in these cases, not on local basis, but on national basis. Because in rare diseases, maybe only 2 people in my city are infected, so they cannot form a self-help group. So they are connected on national level very often using the internet, etc. About half of the local self-help groups, only half, maybe less than half, are affiliated to a nationwide self-help organization. Self-help organizations are active in political contexts. They have negotiations with health insurances, with doctor associations. They promote knowledge about their disease. They want to inform the public, etc. Only one part of their activities is to support the local groups. And because only half of these groups are members of national self-help organizations, that is, in Germany, a strong argument for the use of a local self-help center, a local self-help clearinghouse, because these groups would not get any other support. The term self-help clearinghouse is maybe also unclear here around the table. For us it means it is a professionally done service. I mentioned that usually it's only 1 person or 2 in a local clearinghouse in Germany, and they are serving all topics from alcoholism to depression to rheumatism, etc., including all handicaps and diseases, whatever it is, including social situations like giving birth to twins, which is a problem after a divorce, which is not a disease, etc., etc. So whenever somebody meets this criterion of a self-help group, then he or she can find support in the local clearinghouse. About 300 of them in Germany, which means it's almost covering the country. In every district or in every major city you find such an institution. That is the definition. I don't go through that now. The only thing I want to make clear, the definition was done by us, which means by the professional organization who has knowledge about it. We had a committee, a subcommittee in our association that worked about 2 years to come to this conclusion. Because of the diversity of inner images that our colleagues had. And always somebody said, yeah, but there is one case of where it's different. Okay. Now, I was asked, or we were asked, for national policies. Well, policy, that sounds to me like an organized process. We did not really have that. I rather give some historic milestones for Germany. In the beginning was research. A crazy professor in Gießen, psychoanalyst, psychosomatic medicine, he thought that might be a relevant development in our country, in our society. Let's have a look into that. What is it? What are they doing? How can we support them? And this research project produced not only articles in scientific journals that nobody reads, but he also was not shy to go to TV talk shows and to give interviews to yellow press, etc. So he was really promoting it to the public. He was very eloquent, nice looking, charming person. So he was a very good ambassador of the idea. In 1982, we founded this professional association for the support of self-help groups. This is not a football, although we are world champions. If you look into details, it shows 4 hands holding each other in a circle, so that was meant to be a good symbol for a self-help group. So this organization was the lobbying agent for the support of this principal approach, not self-help in cancer, not self-help in addiction, but self-help as self-help. Then we had some ideological support from the WHO Euro. WHO is divided in so-called regions. One region is Europe, the headquarters is in Copenhagen. And there was a German. So she promoted the WHO to support self-help, and we had a meeting in Belgium and we created an agenda which was then spread by WHO Euro, and the first recommendation was do create self-help clearinghouses on all levels, local, regional, federal, state, nation. And we were one of the few who used that and transferred it in reality. So in 1984, the National Clearinghouse, that's not Naxos, a Greek island, it's Narcos, a German abbreviation for National Clearinghouse. Then the government took over and created these programs of pilot project, demonstration projects. So the government gave money, the federal government. Let's try out, let's finance and support some self-help clearinghouses, and some scientists should look into it. Is it productive? Here for the first time we had an element of what you said, evidence. Is it productive in a wider sense? So the outcome was more groups, more participants, and more stability in their work. So that result was brought to the politicians. Do you want that? If you want that, more groups, more stable groups, more participants. For political, ideological, economic reasons, if you want that politically, do support clearinghouses. I mentioned 2 programs because here in the middle is the unification of our country. So we repeated our West German approach in the East German countries, states. Then the government was convinced, and they said, okay, it is useful for whatever reason, democracy, saving money, whatever reason. The government said, we want that to happen. Who should pay for it? And in Germany they had a tricky answer. They said, we don't pay for it from tax money, we give it to the health insurances. Now the health insurances, like in Austria, they are not state-run, they are independent bodies, but they are under public law, kind of semi-state institution. And usually Germans have to be a member in such a health insurance, and the money is taken away from the wages directly. So I feel it's a tax. Legally it's not a tax, but I feel it's a tax. And the government said, these statutory health insurances, they have to fund, and now here you find it, they have to fund groups, organizations, and clearinghouses. And in this year it's approximately 45 million euro. Now remember the population, right? But nevertheless, when the law was empowered, it was 1 Deutschmark. You remember Deutschmark? We remember it well. 1 Deutschmark per head per year. So that's how it was started. And there you can see there was no evidence. Why not 2 Deutschmark or half a Deutschmark? That was a political decision. And it was only possible because in this period the health minister on national level was from the Green Party, and it was a woman, and she was devoted to the green values of basic democracy, grassroots development, be active outside the system, you know, all these kind of things. And some people had some conversation with her, and then she said, okay, let's do it. And since then it's in the law. And a last step was about 10 years ago, when self-helpers were invited to be patient representatives. That is, since 10 years, a big issue in Germany, like in many other countries. And there were 2 arguments. One was the argument of democracy, to come back to Ed's introduction here at the cradle of democracy. In every other system, like in the industry, like in university, like in education in schools, you always find some kind of democratic participation. You know, in schools the parents have their voice, in industry the trade unions have their voice, but not in medicine, not in the medical sector. So it was the government who said, we want to put an end to this. The doctors were not happy. You know, they were like little kings. So democracy was one thing, and after this long development here, you know, the government said, maybe they have something to contribute, these patient representatives. Maybe they know something about their illness, about their disease, about treatment, about diagnosis, about the way the patient is handled in the system. Nobody's responsible, nobody talks to you. Maybe they have something to contribute to make it better, and maybe cheaper. So that's a new thing, that we are sitting now in committees like the Federal Joint Committee, that is the paramount body where decisions are made, not about individuals, but about the system. So that's how it became a political process. It was not policy from the beginning, but it became political. I guess that is it.
So, Elena, wait for the microphone. We have a very strict procedure.
How do you see what's happening next, or do you see it will be like this in future? You heard in earlier speech presentations that we have new kind of needs like what is self-help, and the definition has changed and have differentiated. Do you have any, how does it go on, or do you see any possibilities to use, for example, as a service providing?
Well, I think the general tendency is that self-help in Germany is more and more integrated in mainstream systems, which has advantages, influence, but it has disadvantages. The question is, can self-help influence the system, or will the system influence self-help? And as we know how powerful both are, and where the money is, and the public relations, we know which one will influence. So the big task for self-help for me is to find a balance between these contradicting positions or functions, and not to forget what's going on the local level. So that is why for me it is always so important to make clear that if I say self-help, I always mean self-help group. It's only a short version, because self-help is a senseless term, you know. What does it mean? I'm hungry and I eat a sandwich. You know? I have a headache and I go and buy an aspirin. That's self-help. That's used. So it's always collective forms, and the danger is that it becomes like a motor club, right? An automobile club. I'm a member of the German motor club, but that means I do not help other motorists because I'm a member of the club. So the old idea, I help you, you help me, if my car is in trouble, this is gone, because they have professionals, mechanics driving around. I give them a call and they rescue me. So I have no interest in you being the other member. And that happens in some of the very big self-help organizations. For example, the German League Against Rheumatism, they have 260,000 members. I mean, there's no group appeal at all. I pay my fee and I get the service, right, and the information. But a completely different thing is whether I go to the local group against rheumatism, and then I know you, and I know your name, and I know exactly where it hurts in your body. Is it your finger? Is it your knee, etc.? What medication did help? Blah blah blah.
You said that there are other spheres except health that the clearinghouse are dealing with. The question is if there are influence of those groups also of the system, like a patient representative, are they are also changing the welfare system or?
Yes. Well, as your impulse yesterday, in Germany it is very medical minded, very health minded. Let's say health minded, including the psychological things. So anxiety, depression, schizophrenia.
Yeah, twins is not a disease.
Sorry?
Twins.
Yeah,
It's not a disease.
That's right. So it is clear that the clearinghouses are responsible for every problem.
Yeah.
If somebody says, I want to found a self-help group, or I'm looking for one. But the fact is, that is a very small proportion. It's less than 10%. And they are usually active on local level.
They don't
Like parents of children with diabetes, well, it is a medical problem, but the group, of course, is a social event. They lasted for 5 years, and they wrote a beautiful article why they started, why they came to an end, what is the leftover. The leftover is a private circle of 3 families just drinking coffee together. And they had some impact on local basis. They went to the university hospital and said, we do not accept any longer the way you treat our child. And I say that as the president of the local group. You know, there are 20 families behind us, and we have a very good connection to a journalist. right? So, but that is very, very local. Of course, we have on national level, we have the Association of Step Parents and things like that. So they do their political work.
And they consider self-help organization? They consider self-help organization?
Actually, I cannot tell you if they consider themselves. We would have them on our lists.
Yeah.
I just have a question, because everything sounds so perfect how it worked in Germany, compared to what we do in trying to succeed in Switzerland now. But it's a really long and tough process. So I wonder what are the challenges now for the futures? Are there other I don't want to say problems, but maybe you can say something about that.
About future problems, or
yeah, about challenges. What do you face now?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I gave you the panoramic view from a peak of a mountain. I did not tell you how hard it was to climb up. So, I mean, there were successes and backlashes all the time. I also mentioned that we were very lucky in a specific historic situation when we could bring it over to laws, etc. That was a gift because we met a certain person and a certain personality in the ministry. That's not something you can produce. What you can produce is the situation before, you know, that self-help becomes more and more popular, becomes more and more accepted, the number of groups is rising, then it becomes relevant for politicians, because all these people go to elections as well and are part of society. I think funding, even if you see these 45 million, funding is still an issue, because new requests come to all parts of self-help, to the groups, to the organizations, to the clearinghouses, new requests to do this and this and this and this in addition, and there's not always funding following it. So what I see is a kind of overburden. So I could say it's, to use the medical language, it's the side effect of our success. If you understand. Very often politicians come and, couldn't you do this and this? And the answer should be no. If that is an answer to your question.
Mr. Mazzi, I wanted to ask about patient representatives that we talked, because it's interesting. In Greece, during the transition from mental health hospitals to community, there were a lot of boards that they called representatives of ex-users of psychiatry or survivors of psychiatry. But it was typical, the decisions were already taken. And I wanted to ask how is really their voices or their opinions taken into account in these boards?
That's a very interesting question. I said this process started about 10 years ago, and again it started from government. Government said, okay, we want that. It is very open if it has any effect at all, or is it a kind of fig leaf or an alibi? Yeah. Do you say that, English people? Alibi? Yeah, okay. There are various answers concerning various committees. Sometimes it's really for nothing. For example, I have given up my seat in some committees because I said that costs a lot of time and it doesn't have any effect. There are other committees where I would say it does have an effect. The minimum effect is that all these professionals, mainly doctors and professors, they talk in another language if you or me, if we are present, right? So they don't make jokes about patients any longer. So that is a minimum effect. But it depends very much on the standing of the patient representative. Does he understand the dynamic of such a committee? Is he able to present his clear position, but also accept that compromises have to be made? Is he able to contact all these assholes? You must share the table over supper, things like that. So that is very important. If you become like a revolutionary, blow up all psychiatric hospitals, then your voice will not be heard. So both sides have to learn. The metaphor of a dance, it takes two to tango. The metaphor of the dance is very useful. Both sides are completely not trained just one episode. When I went to this Paramount committee, they were sitting there already. They had started the session before the official time, and there were no chairs for the patient representatives. So we were not really welcome. And we were not welcome. It was the government who said, you have to accept them. Please bring in another chair.
We are familiar with this picture, and that's why we asked.
And one last question, because
just one thing to clarify. The connection between self-help, like the German approach, and this patient. Listen to me, it's how is it connected?
Yes. The patient participation idea comes from another angle, from another direction, right? But as soon as the government said we want to have patient participation, the big question is, who is the patient? Right? Okay. Many doctors say, but everybody is a patient. I, being a doctor, I go to my dentist, Okay, forget about this. The answer in Germany was a German answer: organizations. It should be organized. And the government gave some criteria and said these criteria must be fulfilled by an organization. For example, this football organization, German Association for the Support of Self-Help Groups, was accredited as such a organization. There are 4 in total, and once you are accredited, a 5th organization could apply, but that never happened. And once you are accredited, then you can send a person. So my organization sends me to the Committee of Psychological Problems, and then they have to accept me. That's another dynamic compared to what sometimes happens, that you are asked to come to a committee, right? Then the ownership is here, and they select you well, you must be a nice guy fitting in. In this case, I am sent, and they have to accept me. It's a very complicated process. I can tell you more about it if you want.